Hello, it's Mark Anderson again, and in this session I'm going to be discussing generic strategies which can be implemented at a business level in order to find competitive advantage and to compete in a chosen market or industry. You might remember that at the beginning of the module, then I talked about the strategic management process, and that included asking three important questions. The first one is concerned with analysis of an industry, analysis of the environment, and an understanding of what a firm actually needs in terms of resources and competencies in order to gain strategic advantage and achieve a sustainable competitive advantage. So we have by now discussed the various frameworks which we can use to understand the macro environment and the industry analysis. We've looked at resources and competencies and critical success factors. So now we're in a position to move on to the next key question in the process of creating strategy. We've now got choice. We now want to decide where we want our business to be. And that involves a number of topics. Principally, we will be looking at corporate level strategy and the associated topics of strategic directions and strategic methods. These topics are all concerned principally with large corporations which might contain within their portfolio a number of different businesses that are operating in different markets. So, for example, General Electric operates in medical equipment markets and in jet engine markets, so very separate markets. Or they might be working in the same industry, such as Volkswagen, but in different strategic groups of that industry. So they have the Bugatti business as well as the more mainstream Volkswagen business. So corporate level strategy is concerned with choosing which particular markets to operate in. And strategic directions and strategic methods, all of which we'll come to in the future, are concerned with deciding how to maintain growth or how to achieve strategic advantage in those chosen markets. So today we're going to pay particular attention to the business level strategy, which is the strategy by which an individual business or an individual strategic business unit from a large corporation decides to compete in a particular market. So we'll be considering the choices faced by independent companies such as Twickenham Brewery or the Morgan Motor Car Company, or a strategic business unit from within a larger corporation, such as the medical equipment division for General Electric. How do those businesses actually compete in their chosen markets? So the large corporations will have different strategic business units, and they may well be competing in different ways in different markets, or in different ways within different strategic groups within the same industry. We'll principally be concerned with Porter's generic strategies, and here's a list of the 4 different generic strategies which Porter has identified, and we'll discuss these in a moment. We'll then look briefly at a slightly contrasting approach, a slightly different perspective on the generic strategies, which is offered by Bowman and Devaney and is encapsulated in what's called their strategy clock. So, turning to Porter and his generic strategic options, or generic strategy options. Porter sees there are 2 variables in deciding which strategy to follow. The first is the competitive scope which is going to be chosen, and that might be a very broad scope, so addressing a very wide section of an industry, or it might be more of a niche approach, a narrow target focused on particular segments or a particular segment in a bigger industry. So we've got scope on the one hand, and then the other variable is what's the basis of the competitive advantage which is going to be chosen. Is it going to be based on having the lowest cost in the industry, Or is it going to be based at the other end of what might be seen as a spectrum? Is it going to be based on offering a higher value product which meets more requirements of the potential customers? So with these two variables, we end up with these four generic strategies: cost leadership, differentiation, both concerned with addressing a large, broad target section of the industry, or focused cost leadership and focused differentiation, which are based on narrower targets within a broader industry. So we'll look at these four different options in a bit more detail. First of all, cost leadership. So targeted at a broad section of an industry, and the objective is to achieve profit by selling high volume of low price products. So very similar to the original Tesco mantra of stack it high and sell it cheap. In most cases, the low price which is offered to the marketplace is achieved by offering a no-frills product. So removing lots of different features or elements of service that customers might pay more for to other companies. Now, in order to be successful in this approach and to achieve and sustain the highest profitability in the industry, it means that to be successful, you must have the lowest cost base in your industry. In order to achieve that cost leadership, then you've got to have very good cost control. As we mentioned in the past, then costs can be reduced as you build experience. You learn how to do things better, more quickly, make fewer mistakes. So as you climb the experience curve, your cost base should reduce. By careful understanding and analysis of the value chain, and understanding what should you make, what should you buy in, then again you can start to control your costs, remove elements which cost more than you can afford in order to offer a product at a low price. It also means that you have to have a very efficient organization to make good use of any resources. Remember, of course, I have said before that this seeking low cost doesn't mean that you won't have to stump up high capital in order to invest in expensive but very efficient resources of machinery or location. It's also normally necessary to have a high market share in order to achieve the best economies of scale possible relative to your competitors. You must also clearly understand what your customers want. How far can you cut away the frills? At what point will have you cut the product or the service too close to the bone that your customers are no longer willing to buy it at any price? And you must, continue to be successful as a cost leader, then the firm has got to be aware of changing technology or consumer trends or business trends, so that, again, as in the previous point, what might have been acceptable in the past is no longer acceptable to customers, or as we can see maybe in the budget airlines, where the original low-cost carriers are now adding back some of the frills which they cut away in the early days. Or, of course, you have to be aware of new technology that comes along that might threaten the advantage you've gained by efficiency or outsourcing. The alternative then to pursuing a cost leadership strategy, and for Portra it's very much an alternative. It's either one or the other. The alternative then for Portra is to pursue a strategy of differentiation. And in this case, a company tries to offer the highest value to the customer. They want their product or service to be highly valued by the customer, perhaps putting together a package of products or a complete package of service and products. And this suits the needs of the customer so well that they're very happy to pay a higher price. Of course, in order to achieve this differentiation, then the company needs to invest in a lot of people perhaps, but also more technical, more involved, more complex products and services, all of which require a high level of investment. Now, the differentiation, and try not to think of differentiation meaning simply different. Simply being different is not sufficient to be successful. The product or service must suit the requirements of the customers. They're not going to buy it just because it is different, but because it suits their needs more than anything else. So it might be based on an improved product or service, so encompassing new technology or better design, which is often seen in the car industry as cars come out with improved engines for lower emissions and greater efficiency in terms of fuel consumption. We can see how electric technology is being applied in the car industry to set those cars apart. And electric cars are generally more expensive than other cars. It might be that this differentiation is achieved through the power of the brand, by the reputation that the firm has been able to achieve. So think of firms like Timberland or Apple. Although, of course, Apple is a highly technology-based company, it also has a very, very high brand, and it's often said that die-hard Apple customers are prepared to forgive Apple for many things. Think of some of their product failures. Apple customers are prepared to forgive Apple for many mistakes simply because they believe in the brand so much. Or the differentiation might be based on focusing on a competency, an area of service or manufacture or design in which that firm is an acknowledged leader. So think about perhaps John Lewis, which has an amazing reputation for customer service. The products they offer are available in many, many other different stores or different channels. But the overall service that John Lewis offer is much higher than at other stores. And people are prepared more to shop at places like John Lewis and Waitrose because of the particular approach that they have to retailing. In order to be successful in following a differentiation strategy, intangible assets such as brands or reputation, which was mentioned above, or perhaps patents for specific technology, or maybe design copyright for particular designs, these can ensure that a particular unique and protected source of differentiation is available to the firm. Again, though, as with pursuing a low-cost approach, a firm should be aware that the basis of differentiation, maybe the sorts of services or features that are included in products, are no longer unique, and that more and more people, more and more firms, are building in levels of service or features of products which are now becoming standard rather than previously unique to particular firms. So beware of, over time, that differentiation advantage being whittled away. So cost leadership and differentiation are generally focused on the broad sectors of an industry. But there's also that possibility of focusing on a narrow section. So here we have the option of focus differentiation. So a firm will pick a smaller market segment and again seek a substantial price premium by providing a very high perceived value. So although it's a small sector, the prices charged are much higher, so ultimately the firm can achieve high revenues. So think of car companies like McLaren, or pens and jewellery, watches like Montblanc or Rolex, or shoes like Manolo Blahnik, if that's how it's pronounced. Very high priced products with a high perception of value, but only available or achievable by small numbers out of the large markets. This does require some segment stability, similar to the differentiation in broader markets. Firms can adapt to changing requirements, technological requirements, or customer and social trends, and what might have been a protected, narrow market segment might start to be addressed by firms from other larger segments. So over time, thinking about strategic groups, those different groups or segments will move, will change. The basis of the segmentation may well change, and a firm which was focusing on specific markets may no longer have an advantage. The alternative, again in Porter's strict terms, the alternative to focusing on differentiation in a narrow market segment is to focus on cost leadership in a narrow market. This is maybe counterintuitive, because often we talk about cost leadership being achieved by having a high market share, by building large volumes and achieving economies of scale greater than the competitors have. But there are instances where, as a firm grows larger, it doesn't actually manage to reduce its costs, but we see that there can be diseconomies of scale. So service-based industries, such as advertising agencies, as they get larger and larger, inevitably they don't actually reduce their cost base. It's actually increased, so they become more glitzy. They have bigger, fancier offices. They need to pay their staff more money than smaller agencies. This gives the opportunity for small groups of people from within larger advertising agencies to break away and set up their own smaller agency, but still be able to offer very high levels of creativity, but better levels of service because they're more dedicated to their particular clients. But importantly, they won't have the large, glitzy West End or those high costs that are associated with the larger agencies. So they can offer personalized service, high creativity, but at a much lower price than the larger agencies. As we can often see in other approaches, embracing new technology or implementing new technology is a way to overcome competitive barriers. And a good example of new technology coming along is 3D printing. And 3D printing removes the advantage which large manufacturers might have in some process industries in terms of the cost of manufacturing products, particularly plastic-based products, but increasingly also applied to metal-based products. So no longer in some areas do you need a large-scale factory, expensive machinery and facilities, which normally would need high volumes in order to be affordable. Now, with the 3D printing technology becoming more and more widely used, small companies can compete against larger companies who traditionally have enjoyed economies of scale. You can see that when we're discussing should a firm try to compete on the basis of low cost, or should it add value, i.e. target the addition of services or product features to appeal as more of a package solution to meet the needs of particular customers more than other firms cannot meet them. You can see that this is actually embodied a lot in the value chain. And one of the functions of the value chain, which was discussed in a previous presentation, was are there elements of activities which can be outsourced. So Apple don't do their manufacturing, they leave that to somebody else, and they concentrate on the marketing and after-sales service and on the technology development. So by freeing up capital from the manufacturing, they can gain greater differentiation by investing in marketing and sales and the development and implementation of new and integration of new technologies. So you can use the value chain to assess where money should be invested in order to achieve better differentiation. Or of course you can use it from a Ryanair type perspective. Where can we reduce cost? Where should we be more efficient in order to be the lowest cost producer? You can see that the value chain can be used to demonstrate two sides of the same coin. Reduce cost or increase cost in order to increase differentiation. So Porter says there are these two broad approaches: differentiation or low cost, and that might be on a broad scale or a narrow scale. And he sees it as very black and white. You're in one of those boxes. Cliff Bowman has a slightly different perspective on the idea of choices to compete in markets. And he has a perspective which is similar in many respects to Porter's approach. Instead of cost, then he has a variable of price, which we can see at the bottom. And then we have, rather than what his variables result in is a slightly different depiction, so that we have these various points: low price, low service or product benefits, referred to as no frills, few more products, features and a bit better service, but still at a low price, and it's a low price strategy. High perceived benefits, but a medium price, differentiation. Maybe a higher price, but consequently a smaller market, but still offering high benefit, and we've got focus differentiation. He sees this as more of a spectrum rather than alternatives, and he does clearly identify areas where there's a limit to how much you can charge for products with decreasing benefits. So price too high for a product which is weakly differentiated, and you're not going to get very far. So far very similar to Porter's approach, although even in the way it's depicted, it's more of a spectrum than an alternative, low price or differentiation. It allows for more of an incremental change. But the big difference in Bowman's perspective is the inclusion of a hybrid. That is a mixture of seeking to be the lowest cost provider. So you have the opportunity to charge low prices and compete strongly on price against your competitors, but at the same time offer a high level of differentiation. For Porter, this was a big no. He referred to this concept of a hybrid, a limited or indistinct choice between either focus on low cost or seeking differentiation. He saw that as a firm which lacks clear direction. They're not certain what they're trying to achieve. And so can you reduce cost at the same time as add differentiation? He sees that as too difficult, too cumbersome, too limited in its clarity. And he refers to that as being stuck in the middle between trying to achieve low cost or trying to achieve differentiation. So for Porter, that trying to do both is a big no. Whereas Bowman says, well, it is possible. If you carefully set out with those dual objectives in mind, then it is possible to actually be the lowest cost leader and at the same time add lots of differentiation. So Bowman sees this as an opportunity to succeed and carve out a strong competitive advantage, whereas Porter sees it as a likely road to disorganization, disarray, and disappointment. We'll look in the future at IKEA as an example of how does a firm choose to compete in the markets which they've chosen to be present in. So to what extent do they seek differentiation, and to what extent do they seek cost leadership? And do they follow the Porter approach, or do they follow the Bowman approach, which is more flexible perhaps? In summary then, before we reach the choice of what business strategy to adopt, we must understand what's going on in the macro environment and the industry or competitive environment. So we need to have done our macro, our pestle analysis. We need to have done a five forces industry analysis and understand what's going on, what are the changes that are likely to occur, how have we arrived at the point that we are now, and where do we fit into that? How can we achieve competitive advantage? What is it that the customers value? And how can we put together a set of resources, what competencies do we need to be able to build to achieve strategic capability? And those resources and competencies must meet that framework, remember, that Barney has suggested, of value, if you can say it, imitability, rarity, and organizational support. I.e., have we got a distinctive, difficult to copy or substitute form of strategic capability? And then we've got to understand, well, how do we fit into the broader landscape? What choices are we allowed to take by our stakeholders? And of course, will our choice bring us into direct competition with competitors? Or can we make a choice which chooses that calmer part of the market or industry in which there are blue waters, where we can stamp our own mark on the marketplace? Don't forget to do the reading, and also there is a short video that can introduce you to the nature and benefits of 3D printing if you haven't come across this before.